city in the early 1970s was a different world for a victim of sexual assault. The journey toward any semblance of justice began with a profoundly traumatic and often humiliating process. A woman would be taken to a busy, impersonal hospital emergency room. There she would be examined by a doctor or intern who likely had no specific training for such a sensitive situation. The goal was vague, the procedure unstructured. They might use a single swab for multiple samples, dropping it into an unmarked container. They might collect hairs with bare hands or toss potential evidence like clothing into a generic plastic bag. The entire ordeal felt like a second violation, a chaotic and confusing ritual that rarely led to any concrete results. The evidence, if it even made it to the police evidence room, was often compromised, unusable, or lost entirely. Cases collapsed before they even began, and predators operated with impunity, shielded by this systemic failure. It was this glaring void that a Chicago-based serologist, Dr. Alexander Weiner, and a meticulous detective from the city's violent crimes unit, Louis Vitullo, were determined to fill. Vitullo, in particular, was frustrated. He saw intelligent investigations stall and fail not for a lack of leads or witness accounts, but because the physical proof, the most undeniable truth, was being destroyed at the very first step. He envisioned a solution that was both simple and revolutionary, a single standardized kit. He imagined a box that could be kept in every hospital and police precinct, containing every tool needed to properly document an assault. But an idea is one thing. Giving it a physical form is another. This is where the true and long overlooked genius emerged. Working alongside them was a woman named Martha Goddard. While Vitullo understood the legal need and Weiner the biological science, Goddard possessed the practical, meticulous mind of an inventor. She was the architect. She designed the specific tools and the precise workflow. She selected the cardboard slides for smears, the tiny envelopes for pubic hairs collected with a clean comb, the sterile swabs with rigid paper shafts that wouldn't degrade, and the elaborate paper drapes to protect the victim's dignity during the process. Most importantly, she designed the intricate chain of custody forms that accompanied every sample, a paper trail that would make the evidence admissible in court. Her kit transformed a chaotic medical exam into a sterile scientific evidence-gathering operation. It was a quiet revolution contained within a small brown cardboard box, a first step toward treating these crimes with the seriousness they deserved. Introduction of the rape kit was initially met with a wave of optimism. For the first time, police departments had a standardized, court-admissible way to collect the most intimate evidence of a crime. The kits were distributed, and officers and nurses were trained in their use. There was a sense that a new, more scientific era of justice for sexual assault victims was dawning. Each sealed box represented hope, a tangible chance that this time the perpetrator would be identified, that this case would be the one that stuck. However, this hope quickly curdled into a cruel irony. The very efficiency of the kit became its own undoing. It was too successful at its primary job, generating evidence. Suddenly, every reported assault produced a kit, and each kit contained a multitude of samples that required expensive, time-consuming analysis by overworked and underfunded state crime labs. Police departments, already stretched thin, now found themselves drowning in these small brown boxes. They piled up in storage closets, crowded evidence vaults, and filled forgotten corners of precinct basements. Each one was a closed file, a silent, weighty promise that had been made and immediately broken. The kits became physical manifestations of a system's failure. For a victim, undergoing the lengthy and invasive evidence collection was an act of immense courage and trust. Trust that the state would use this evidence to pursue justice. But that trust was betrayed by the simple, logistical reality of neglect. The kit, designed to empower, instead became a symbol of it. A survivor might spend years wondering what had happened to their case, unaware that the entire story of their assault was sitting in a cardboard box on a metal shelf, buried behind thousands of others. The evidence was there, but the will and the resources to process it were not. This created a second institutional violation, a message echoed not through words, but through silence. You are not a priority. The system had created a perfect tool for capturing truth, but it had no idea what to do with it once it was caught. The backlog wasn't just a paperwork problem. It was a graveyard of unresolved trauma for decades. The official narrative was a simple one, a story of male innovation in a time of crisis. The invention of the rape kit was credited to the collaborative work of a determined detective and a brilliant scientist. The history books, the police training manuals, and the news articles all pointed to Louis Vitullo and Dr. Alexander Wiener. Their contributions were real and significant, but the story was incomplete. A silhouette missing, its crucial center. The true architect had been written out, her role diminished to a footnote, if it was mentioned at all. The woman who had been erased was Martha Goddard. While Vitullo provided the driving force and Wiener the scientific authority, it was Goddard who possessed the practical, meticulous genius required to transform a concept into a functioning system. She was not merely an assistant, she was the engineer. Vitullo knew what evidence was needed for court. Wiener understood the biological material they were collecting, but Goddard alone knew how to build the vessel that would bridge those two worlds. She designed the specific components, sourcing the right paper for the smears so it wouldn't react with the stains, developing the sealed envelopes to prevent contamination, and crafting the elaborate paper drapes to preserve a victim's dignity during the process. She meticulously plotted the chain of custody forms, understanding that the integrity of the evidence was just as important as the evidence itself. Her erasure was not a conspiracy, but a symptom of the era. In the male-dominated fields of law, enforcement, and forensic science, the work of a woman was often overlooked, her credit absorbed by her male colleagues. Goddard faded from history, becoming a ghost in her own machine. The rape kit, a tool so fundamentally important for seeking justice for women, was itself a victim of a system that routinely undervalued the contributions of women. It was a painful paradox that the very instrument designed to validate the stories of victims had its own creator's story invalidated and buried. For years, the kit's history stood as a monument to a partial truth, its complete origin story waiting patiently in the archives for someone to look closer and ask the right questions. Mountain of untested kits, for so long a symbol of systemic failure, began to reveal its terrifying secret. As cities, shamed by advocacy groups and finally securing federal grants, began the monumental task of processing the backlog, a chilling pattern emerged. It was no longer about solving one crime at a time. The DNA evidence, meticulously preserved for decades within Martha Goddard's carefully designed envelopes and tubes, began to talk to itself across time and geography. A single DNA profile from a kit collected in 1988 in Manchester would light up a database, showing a match to a kit from a 1995 assault in Birmingham. That same profile would then be linked to another case in Leeds from 2003. Each hit was not a resolution but a horrifying revelation. The backlog had not just contained thousands of isolated crimes, it had inadvertently been warehousing the undiscovered patterns of serial predation. These weren't one-off offenders. They were hunters who had operated for years, even decades, with the confident assumption that their crimes were forgotten, their evidence lost to the chaos of an overloaded system. The rape kit, designed to catch a single criminal, had become the most powerful tool for criminal network analysis ever conceived. It was a brutal, unintended consequence. The neglect that had allowed these kits to gather dust had also allowed these men to remain free, to attack again and again. But now, the very passage of time that had worked in their favor became their undoing. The science of DNA had advanced exponentially since the kits were collected. Samples that might have only yielded a blood type in the 1980s could now provide a crystal-clear genetic fingerprint. The backlog, once a disgrace, was transformed into a digital map of hidden monsters, each connected dot on the screen representing a life shattered and a long overdue reckoning. Police departments were no longer just closing cold cases. They were launching new investigations into men who had believed they had escaped justice forever. The legacy of the rape kit is not a simple story of a good invention. It is a complex tapestry woven from threads of brilliance, neglect, erasure, and unexpected redemption. It stands as a powerful lesson in how justice is not a single act, but a fragile chain, a process that can be broken at any link by a dismissive officer, an overwhelmed lab, a historian's oversight, or a systemic lack of funding. For decades, the chain was broken, and the truth remained trapped in those silent boxes. Yet, the story ultimately bends toward a grim form of hope. The same tool that failed a generation of victims became the key to unlocking their justice years later. It proved that evidence does not forget, even when people and systems do. The meticulous design of the kit, born from Martha Goddard's determination, ensured that the proof could survive decades of neglect, waiting for the day when technology and political will would finally catch up to its potential. This delayed justice could never undo the trauma, but it offered something profound: validation and the undeniable proof that what happened was real, was documented, and finally, mattered. The secret history of the rape kit forces us to look beyond the object itself to the human systems that surround it. It asks us to remember the forgotten innovators, to listen to the victims who were silenced by inaction, and to confront the terrifying patterns that only become visible when we bother to look. The thousands of kits still sitting on shelves today are not just a backlog, they are a choice. They represent ongoing failures and future possibilities. They are a reminder that the past is never truly closed, and that within our present neglect might lie the crucial evidence for protecting someone tomorrow. The history of the rape kit is a warning and a mandate to finish the work that was started over 50 years ago and to ensure that the search for truth is never again postponed.